double whammy. We talked to journalist Ben Adler about how we can try to save the planet that Trump is currently trying so hard to destroy. And we talked to Chase Madar, who is a lawyer and writer, and the author of The Passion of Bradley Manning, the story of the suspect behind the largest security breach in U.S. history. By the way, when Chase wrote that book, it was before Chelsea Manning came out as transgender and came out as Chelsea, so that's why the name is Bradley. Now, I gotta offer a trigger warning. Ben Adler is a liberal. It's been a while since we've had a liberal, and it's a good thing because we need a diversity of opinions, so every now and then we invite someone from the relative extreme right onto the show. I jest, but he's going to say some things that you guys are going to find triggering, and make sure you sit tight because when I talk to Chase Madar, he responds to a lot of the things that Ben says, including that we should give Obama more credit for his commutations and pardons. And you're definitely going to want to join our Patreon this week because the bonus content includes a dramatic reading of Scooter Libby's erotic fiction, which includes, I'm not kidding you, bear sex. Bear as in the animal, not as in the term for a guy. Go to patreon.com/The Katie Halper Show. Again, that's patreon.com/The Katie Halper Show. Our hashtag is KTHalpShow. That's letter K, letter T, HALPSHOW. That's Katie Halp Show. Please rate us and review us on iTunes and join our Patreon. Thanks a lot, and see you guys next week when we will bring you an interview with Nina Turner, former Ohio State Senator Nina Turner. And if it's 7 p.m. on WBAI, which is 99.5 FM, or WBAI.org on the interwebs, you can always find The Katie Halper Show. And I'm here with my co-host, Gabe Pacheco.
Hey, what's going on, everybody?
What's going on, Gabe?
Katie, I'm here. I'm present.
Gabe is present, physically and spiritually. And, of course, on the engineering ivories, tickling those ivories, is Reggie Johnson.
Tickling the ivories, huh?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, we'll go with that.
Are there ebonies, too, for the... What are those things called in the piano? You have the white... The ivories are the main thing. What are those things called? Anyone know?
I don't know.
You know, the black things? Anyone know?
I don't know.
We're going to have to find out.
That's something I have to check.
Yeah. You know, I used to play piano when I was a little kid, but I threw tantrums. And my mom...
What'd you get through? Did you get through chopsticks?
Yeah.
Were you able to play chopsticks?
I did some original compositions, too. I'm not kidding. I really did.
So, really avant-garde stuff.
Yeah, but my mom... I mean, it's my fault. I was apparently a very willful child.
Yeah, hard to believe.
Contrary to present-day presentation. And by the way, guys, so my mom made me quit. All right, I made myself quit because I threw...
very dispiriting that your mother, the narrative that she made you quit.
I know, I could have been a real virtuoso. But it's not, it's me. I threw tantrums and she couldn't deal with it. I get it. I get it. So I don't blame you, Mom. What if that was like a chip I walked around with on my shoulder, thinking that but for my mom making me quit, I'd be like...
You would have been a modern Mozart.
Yes.
You know?
Momo.
Yeah.
Modern Mozart, yeah. And in studio we have with us, who's going to join our conversation very shortly after we get through some headlines, we have Ben Adler, who's a journalist, and he's going to be talking to us about some environmental news because we got to talk about the planet now that Trump is going to be the president.
Oh, yeah. It's our third hottest year in a row.
Oh, wow.
Right?
Yeah.
And I heard that in the news, and immediately Nellie's It's Getting Hot in Here came into my head.
Oh, I thought you were going to say and it immediately came on, which would have been really cool.
Serendipitous, maybe.
Right, serendipitous, yeah. Really cool, really hot. Oh, and I'm going to be playing a little bit of a cover. I did a cover, guys. I'm creating a music video.
So you've drifted away from piano, which you gave up because your mom was against it.
Yes.
Into the realm of sort of like singer
coverage.
Because
we're losing a lot of coverage with the Republicans. Am I right? How do you like that? That political joke, Obamacare, health coverage. Someone's got to provide coverage. So let's talk about some stories. Chelsea Manning was commuted. Yeah.
Commuted.
And you guys know who Chelsea Manning is?
Are you going to break it down?
Sure.
Pull out the Daily News.
According to the Daily News, I bought the Daily News and the New York Post because they both had very classy things on the cover. New York Post's classy headline is Obama lets a traitor go free. The Daily News says prison breaks and says Prez offers freedom for WikiLeaks spy. 1970s terrorists amid record pardon push. That's not the same person. They're talking about Chelsea Manning being the alleged WikiLeaks spy and Oscar Lopez Rivera being the 1970s terrorist.
Puerto Rican nationalist.
Puerto Rican nationalist,
That's
right?
Puerto
Rican nationalist.
One man's Puerto Rican nationalist is a reactionary's terrorist.
It's funny because his sentence was commuted back when Bill Clinton was in office.
Right.
But the other people that were also being held under the same charges, he had solidarity with them, and he said, I don't want to be let out if they're not let out. And then they all got let out.
I know.
And they didn't.
And he was still in.
He was still in.
That's some solidarity forever.
Solidarity forever. Solidarity forever.
Almost forever, but luckily it's not forever anymore because Obama is commuting that.
Yeah,
and
last ninth inning.
Yeah. I'm going to read a little bit of what Democracy Now! Had to say about it. President Obama has commuted the sentences of Army whistleblower Chelsea Manning and Puerto Rican independence activist Oscar Lopez Rivera as part of more than 200 commutations issued Tuesday. Oscar Lopez Rivera has been in prison for about 35 years? I'm not sure. That's an interesting way to phrase it. Was that an intern? They were like, meh, about Amy, like more or less 35, give or take. Much of the time in solitary confinement. In 1981, Lopez Rivera was convicted on federal charges, including seditious conspiracy, conspiring to oppose U.S. authority over Puerto Rico by force. In 1999, President Bill Clinton commuted the sentences of 16 members of the FALN, but Lopez Rivera refused to accept the deal because it did not include 2 fellow activists who have since been released. Under Obama's commutation, Lopez Rivera will be released on May 17th. I'm gonna pull up my Chelsea Manning facts, but you know what? Let's just bring Ben into the discussion.
Let's get him in the room. Is Ben in the building? Where is Ben?
Ben, where are you? Say hi.
Hey, everyone.
The fastest runner.
Ben is in the house.
Ben was in the room the whole time. We're gonna break down that fourth wall for you that we love breaking down. Ben was in the room, which is why I laughed so hard at Gabe saying that. Reggie, you're covering your mouth. Ben, do you see this happens?
You hear me run out of the room. You just hear footsteps, bump, 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 bump,
exactly.
and like yelling in the distance.
Yeah. And then like 10 minutes later, Ben's in the room.
Then a breathy Ben.
Yeah, exactly.
Just huffing and puffing.
And blowing our WBA house down. And do you have anything in general you want to say? No pressure.
This is not what I cover, but I do think that leftists who don't give Obama enough credit for certain things, one of the things they've missed is how much he's used commutation and pardons. He's used it more than any other president. A lot of nonviolent drug offenders have been let out. He's definitely really deployed that power to pursue at least what he considers to be justice. I don't have a view on whether Chelsea Manning should or should not have.
Really?
No, only because I haven't followed it enough.
Right.
I mean, people who I tend to agree with about things tend to all support her commutation, and I probably would too if I knew enough about it, but I don't.
Here's the thing.
Guys, let's give a lefty clap for Obama. Come on. Come on. Gabe, come on. Thank you. That's a reluctant clap, but you know what?
I hate snitches, but I love whistleblowers.
Whistleblowers get stitches doesn't have quite the same ring to it.
No, but it's
whistleblowers get lawnmowered.
Yeah. Sometimes. You know what's the difference? What's the difference between a whistleblower and a snitch? Chelsea Manning was talking truth to power.
Yes.
You know?
From Democracy Now! President Obama has commuted the sentence of Army whistleblower Chelsea Manning. Chelsea Manning is now set to be freed on May 17th after Obama shortened her sentence from 35 years to 7. Attorneys for Manning say she's already the longest-held whistleblower in U.S. history. Manning leaked more than 700,000 classified files and videos to WikiLeaks about the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan and U.S. foreign policy. She has been subjected to long stretches of solitary confinement and denied medical treatment related to her gender identity. She attempted to commit suicide twice last year. By the way, when she attempted to commit suicide, do you know what the punishment was?
Break it down.
Solitary confinement.
Always the best cure for suicidal feelings and urges.
Yeah, so that's a great thing to do to someone who's suicidal. So yeah, I mean, Obama not only was freeing her in May, commuted the sentence, but I think he saved her life. And you know who else was released was Dickie Joe Jackson, who I wrote about in Salon a couple years ago. If you go to my Twitter, I'll post it. When I wrote about this, I said, meet the real Walter White, because this is a man who was a lifer for nonviolent crime. He transported drugs, and it was literally to pay for his son's life-saving bone marrow transplant. He had this incredibly rare disease, and he got a bone marrow match from his sister.
He couldn't do a GoFundMe?
He tried. Reagan gave him objects to auction and stuff, but
nobody wanted Reagan's
probably.
He was like, "Here's the bullet they pulled out of me at the Hilton."
Yeah,
and
that'd be amazing.
You can try to sell that. Nobody wanted it.
No, apparently not.
Or here's a signed poster from the movie I made with the monkey.
Which one's that?
He was in a sort of cheesy comedy.
Oh, got it.
Like a buddy movie.
Bonzo. Okay, got it.
Yeah.
Dickie Joe Jackson. He was only one of the 3,278 men and women serving a sentence of life in prison without parole for non-violent crime.
What was the reason and why? Waste all of that human potential and capital in jail.
It's awful. And he would when I interviewed him for this piece, he would counsel people who had killed people and were really depressed because they were in jail, but weren't in jail for life. And he would be like, "You guys, you can do it. You can do it." He told me that when I interviewed him, which was just incredible and crazy.
They're like, "I'm so scarred by the murders I committed. How can I live a life after I get out of here?"
Yeah.
And what are you in here for? And he's like, "I'm here forever because I wanted to save my son's life."
Yeah, basically.
Yeah.
Yeah. You know what? We're going to do a new rule. I started writing new rules before Bill Maher did that. I'm not saying he stole it from me at all. Bill, calm down. But I am saying that since I wrote about new rules before he did, I'm allowed to say that, right? Because he made them famous. He put them on the map by doing them on his show. But new rule is that you cannot criticize Obama for commuting Chelsea Manning's sentence and call yourself a liberal or progressive.
Okay.
Why? I don't agree with that.
Excuse me, Ben, back up, because you just said you didn't know enough to comment on it.
Well, that's true. But I'm not sure that the position one has on one commutation of one prisoner in very extraordinary circumstances should be a litmus test for who is a liberal.
This person revealed crimes committed by the Army. I really should have. You know what? Hold on, let's see. I'm going to tweet this out. Guys, help me out. Why am I right that if you don't support Chelsea Manning commutation, you are not a liberal?
One thing with whistleblowing is that the institutions, they never want to snitch on themselves. They never tell you exactly what they're doing wrong. There's no reason for the Army to talk about its crimes. There's no reason for any military apparatus to express that it has committed war crimes. So the only way that you get the information out there to the public is through hard-hitting journalists that are willing to risk the character assassination, the ending of their careers, or you have people within the institutions like a soldier who's going to go outside of the chain of command to reveal the information. And that happens in corporate structures as well. So that's why we need whistleblowers. And, clearly the powers that be are going to be upset whenever their dirty laundry is aired.
I think that's a very, very convincing case.
I don't know anything. I'm completely uninformed.
But I'm going to have to obviously get back on air next week and do like a whole thing on my litmus test. Also, Chase Madar wrote, "Not a single document leaked by Manning was quote unquote top secret." And Chase is a lawyer, so we got to listen to him. Tried to get him on the show.
The question is whether not agreeing with them, it makes you not a liberal. I mean, is it that if you take the wrong position in Katie Halper, Glenn Greenwald's, or Ben Adler's opinion that you're not a liberal?
You know why?
Not necessarily.
Glenn Greenwald, actually, we spoke.
So in the case of Glenn Greenwald, who's not a liberal, he's a leftist.
I'm not a liberal either.
Yeah, I know. So that makes it all the more ironic that you're the self-appointed arbiter.
No. But I think I'm more objective about it. I have no skin in the game, and here's why I think you're not a liberal. Because I think, as Glenn Greenwald brought up in our interview with him, which you definitely should check out, when he was growing up, Daniel Ellsberg was considered a hero. And Daniel Ellsberg, who of course leaked the Pentagon Papers, he is the first person to compare himself to Snowden. He was one of his first allies. Why were liberals for Ellsberg and not for Snowden? And what Greenwald said is that if Snowden had been Snowden under a Republican instead of under Obama, MSNBC would have a 40-foot statue erected to him in front of 30 Rock, which I think is a good way of putting it.
I think there's definitely some truth to that. I also think that trusting government power in the hands of Obama versus Bush is not automatically just stupid partisanship. There's some legitimate reasons to trust that President Obama will use certain kinds of authority more judiciously.
Yeah, and in all fairness, to your point, right, his commuting her sentence shows a kind of
exactly.
But I would also say that the fact that it was a disproportionate sentence means that our government isn't set up the way that Obama would like it, because deep state, blah, blah, blah. Anyway, this is fascinating. We should have enough. We have to do this. We were going to do this, the liberal left debate. We're going to do it. And Gabe, you can judge it. Or you can be the nihilist.
Yeah, I mean, I really don't care who wins. It's totally fine.
Exactly. No skin in the game, like I was saying.
You gotta have skin in the game.
Is that
we
Hillary?
can't just give people free college.
Right.
They need skin
Oh
in
my
the
God.
game.
It's such a weird expression.
I know. And I'm like, ugh. It just makes me think
Skin
of
in-
Leatherface. Like,
Oh
what
my
is this
God.
Texas Chainsaw Massacre?
Yeah,
like,
it's really
we've got to
weird.
skin people and wear their faces as masks over our faces.
Yeah, it's also a particularly fatuous argument in the case of college, where their skin in the game is being given in the form of going to class and doing homework and taking years in which they're not earning money and they're
Right.
foregoing income in those years, right? I mean, they have plenty of skin in the game even if they don't pay tuition.
Yeah,
Yeah,
time
totally.
and labor
Totes.
and personal your investment. You want to get a good grade.
Right.
It's gonna
Right.
it's gonna benefit you.
Oh, you'll just drop out if it's free. I mean, right? I mean, some people might, but
Yeah.
it's not everyone. They have other reasons not
Education is the only path to success in a modern society, but we're not going to give it to you unless you have skin in the game.
You know someone who was upset about Chelsea Manning's commutation? Judith Miller. Do you remember
Thank
Judith
you.
Miller? So Judith Miller is famous for beating the war drums for Iraq and spreading false intelligence about WMDs.
So she loves dead civilians in other countries.
Yes.
That's her
Yeah,
favorite
exactly.
thing.
And since that's one of the things that Chelsea Manning revealed, that makes sense that she wouldn't be a Chelsea Manning fan. But listen to what she actually said. Obama commutes sentence of Chelsea Manning. How many people died because of Manning's leak? You know what I wrote? Definitely less than the people who died as a result of your pushing WMD lies. So there, Judith Miller. I mean, really, have some awareness. You're
Yellow
really going to
cake.
tweet that?
They didn't find the yellow
Yeah.
cake.
It was going to be a cakewalk, and they didn't find the yellow cake.
Yeah.
Wow, I just realized.
I wanted to find the yellow cake.
Of course, no one who would make this argument would be a liberal, but anyone who is unhappy with Chelsea Manning's commutation but was okay with like Scooter Libby getting off scot-free is a complete hypocrite.
Totes, yeah. Because Scooter Libby needs to be free so he can write more books involving sex scenes with bears. Not kidding. You're going to see, you're going to be sorry that I said this. But so we're going to play a cover song that I wrote about Obama. And I think it sums up a lot of the emotions people from the left are feeling. Look out for the music video because that's really gonna sell this. And in order to get the video that's going to be released soon, and you have to watch the Rihanna video. Again, go to my Twitter, you'll find it.
Used to have Obama fever. A skeptical, hopeful believer. I threw my hands on the lever, pulled it 2 times for Obama. I knew he wasn't perfect, but I thought that he'd be bolder. Droned and deported and bailed at the banks for Tim Geithner. But at least he gave us stock and finally protected some Arctic water. You are an neo-living kind of hawkish, but something in the way you move makes me feel like I can't live without you. And Trump is really scary, and I want you to stay. It's not universal health care you've given, but it helped young people and those with preconditions. On and on, Iraq, Yemen, and Afghanistan go. Tell me now, tell me now, tell me now, when will Guantanamo close? You slow down TPP and you are corporate, but something in the way you move makes me feel like I can't live without you. And Trump is really scary, still I want you to stay. Your hair looks so good, gray.
That was none other than Katie Halper as Rihanna singing my Obama cover, my cover of "Stay" by Rihanna, and of course it's dedicated and sung to President Obama. But we are back here at the Katie Halper Show.
I'm imagining him on like a treadmill listening to that.
Yeah.
Just like a single tear.
Oh yeah,
You know,
At least a single tier.
Why do I have to go?
Yes.
I wish I could just be on this treadmill
Forever.
in the West Wing.
Obama, because we know you're listening to this on your treadmill, probably the SoundCloud, because we know you're busy, you can't listen in real time. But you should also free Leonard Peltier. So we are back here. We're back at the Katie Halper Show. We didn't go anywhere. We just played a song, in case you got confused. And we're really excited that we have with us Ben Adler. And again, Ben Adler is a journalist. He writes for Washington Post, Grist. So you have two pieces. One is in the Trump era, all climate progress will be local. And then you have Trump will be the fossil fuel industry's greatest gift. I'm going to name some of the things that Trump is going to want to do. And can you tell me whether or not he can do them?
Okay.
Okay, ready?
Yeah.
Gutting the Paris climate deal.
Yes.
Scrapping the Clean Power Plan.
Yes.
Rolling back smog and mercury standards and coal ash regulations.
Yes, with the caveat that he could be blocked in the courts.
Filling the White House with fossil fuel execs.
Yes.
Approving pipelines and more drilling permits. Permits. Why do people say permits? Anyway.
Yes.
Gutting the EPA.
Yes.
But could he abolish it?
He's not going to.
Okay.
He alone can't. The Republican Congress could. Trump actually proposed to abolish the EPA. The Republicans voted for Trump. They do not actually want to abolish the EPA. Either they actually know they don't. If you took a poll, it would not poll well. And then even half the ones who would say that they do support it, that's just because they don't realize that the EPA is the only thing standing between them and, like, arsenic in their water.
Right. They want to go back to like some Charles Dickens,
Yeah.
like early Industrial Revolution. Just can't even see the sun.
Right.
What's the city in China where that's the case?
Beijing.
Yeah, Beijing.
Yeah, and
They
I've been,
love it
and
there,
it is,
right?
and it is amazing. You look out of the window on what is forecast to be a clear day, and you think, oh my God, it's so cloudy.
Yeah.
It's because of the smog.
And
it's
they-
really something.
Yeah.
Bringing back the coal industry.
No.
Yes!
He can't bring back the coal industry because the coal industry is dying a natural death. Wind and solar are getting cheaper, and natural gas is getting cheaper, and coal is simply losing out to them because of that. The most easily accessed coal reserves have largely been tapped. And also, even if you had a rebound in the amount of coal being produced and burned, the employment would not go up. Like, people in West Virginia are unhappy because they lost their coal jobs. A lot of that is because of mechanization.
Right.
People aren't scooping coal out with shovels anymore, and they're not going to even if you scoop out more coal.
Yeah.
Right? So you get like one guy operating the forklift, or, not actually, a forklift is not the right.
Right. But it's
Example,
like a big
but yeah.
machine.
Yeah.
They just need one
Right.
dude instead
Yeah.
of like
Yeah.
50 guys going down into the cave.
And you, in your piece in the Trump era, all climate progress will be local, that's inspiring, and you talk about all these initiatives in California and Governor Jerry Brown, who was once called Governor Moonbeam. I didn't realize that because of his fascination with outer space. And you quote Brown saying, if Trump turns off the satellites, California will launch its own damn satellite. We've got the scientists, we've got the lawyers, and we're ready to fight. So how much can local initiatives undo or challenge or balance out or counteract what Trump is going to do?
Local governments can do quite a lot. California is something like the 8th largest economy in the world. California has ambitious targets to reduce its emissions. If it meets those targets, that's a significant portion of what the U.S. has committed to doing under the Paris Agreement, for example. You have in New York and California, which are New York's, I think, the third biggest state. These ambitious agendas to switch to clean energy, to switch people over to electric vehicles, and energy efficiency programs. So they're really moving ahead and doing a lot that we want the federal government to do throughout the whole country. But if you've got some of the biggest states doing it on their own, you're still getting a lot of the same benefit.
I just want the government to give me an electric car.
Well, if you move to California, they kind of will.
Give me an electric car.
They're giving a lot, as you say in your article, Ben. They're really incentivizing that.
They're giving rebates. It'll make it cheaper, more affordable.
I would put American flags all over it. I would be like the #1 booster. Or
NASCAR?
whatever, the state flag.
California state flag.
Yeah, I'll put bears all over my car. And they won't be like erotic bears
Right.
from Scooter Libby's erotic fiction.
yeah.
They'll just
Okay.
be like normal meat and potato
Right.
square bears.
Right, square bears, yeah. Prude bears. And when are we going to be underwater? Like, what is the deal, Ben? Just lay it out.
If present trends continue, and present trends meaning global total emissions are rising, in other words, so they're not just getting more and more each year, we're not just piling them on each year, the rate
Right.
is also increasing, then we could have places like Miami Beach underwater by the end of the century.
I mean, Miami's not the whatever. There's not a lot of culture there. That's all I'm going to say. Just kidding.
When you talk about a couple feet of sea level rise, you have to remember a couple feet of increased elevation is like nothing. Like you walk away from the beach in, all over the coast, east and west coast of the United States, and you don't even perceive yourself as having gone uphill, and you've gone uphill a few feet. Those areas are not actually going to be underwater. What they will potentially be is too expensive or dangerous to inhabit because you're going to have much more frequent things like Superstorm Sandy, where they get inundated and they lose power and people die. So then they're going to be abandoned.
Right.
South Florida is unusually flat. There, you actually might be underwater.
So what's the big takeaway, inspiring thing? What can people do to help our planet?
Well, they need to get active in the states.
Okay.
They need to pressure their state governments.
Ben's really into states' rights.
In states where you have some
Just
hope
kidding.
of this. No, it's not a question of states' rights.
I know.
In states where you have progressive pro-climate people in office, pressure them to really go as far as they possibly can. Everything from renewable portfolio standards for their electric utility, investments in and expansions of solar and wind or hydro in some cases, blocking fossil fuel infrastructure, bans on fracking. And they also need to work at winning elections in the state and local level in 2018.
And we didn't even talk about Standing Rock.
It's great to support efforts like Standing Rock. It's absolutely great that people got involved in Standing Rock.
And water is good to have.
Yeah. And people need to get involved in efforts to block fossil fuel infrastructure in their communities like that as well. And, of course, they need to get involved in trying to reverse what happens federally. And they need to also work and pressure their senators to filibuster. Let's say the Republicans want to repeal a major portion of the Clean Air Act. They need to pressure their senators to stand up to that and filibuster it and make sure it doesn't happen.
Great. Ben, thank you so much. Ben Adler, writer, and you can find him at Badler on Twitter. But don't go anywhere, guys. Make sure you stick around. We're about to talk to Chase Madar about the very thing we debated. Thanks so much for talking.
Hey, great to be chatting with you.
Chase Madar is a civil rights attorney in New York City and the author of The Passion of Bradley Manning, the story behind the WikiLeaks whistleblower, which is released by Verso Books. And Chase writes for places like The Nation, Common Dreams, The American Conservative, which is interesting.
Hey, I can explain that.
Oh, by all means. And you know what? This is a safe space, so no need to apologize for that. And Jacobin.
Right.
Which is less probably off-brand.
Mm-hmm.
But
yeah.
And you have a great piece called you and Greg Grandin, who big fan of Greg Grandin. He's a big friend of the show. We love him. You and Greg chatted about Chelsea Manning's release. Chelsea Manning will be free, how Obama came to commute Manning's sentence, and what her leaks revealed about America. It's on The Nation. So I wanted to know if you could just kind of provide us with some background about the case, about the significance of the release.
Okay. Chelsea Manning was born Bradley Manning. Chelsea is a transgender woman now, but she was born Bradley Manning. And after a pretty rough upbringing in Oklahoma, she enlisted in the U.S. military and was deployed to Iraq as part of the surge. Deployed as an Army intelligence official to a forward operating base, Hammer, in the middle of nowhere. And she enlisted to serve in Iraq with a lot of idealism, thinking that Operation Iraqi Freedom really would be about bringing freedom to Iraqis. She was a true believer. I say that in spite of being a very intelligent, critically minded person already. But when she was working at Forward Operating Base Hammer as an intelligence officer, she found that there was an incredible amount of horrible things going on with the complicity or with the full participation of the U.S. and allied occupying army. For instance, she found out that it was official U.S. policy to condone torture when practiced by Iraqi officials.
Was that because we wanted to not be cultural relativists? Was that a way of being sensitive to not being Amerocentric?
You know, I don't think it was that woke. I think
exactly.
It was.
Thank you for saying
I don't think it was woke.
Yeah.
I think it was just Donald Rumsfeld finding it expedient. So even though the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff was saying publicly that it was official U.S. policy to stop torture in Iraq and that we had gone there to spread human rights, the actual policy, which Chelsea Manning uncovered in Fragmentary Order 242, it's kind of notorious, was to allow it. That was Rumsfeld's little order to expressly allow torture when committed by the Iraqi authorities. And that's just one example of many things where Manning found that the image of the war at home that she was tracking in the U.S. media was not really matching up to the reality that she saw both firsthand as a soldier with her own boots on the ground and as an intelligence officer who's monitoring the situation closely. And what really changes things for her is when she is ordered to help round up some Iraqi civilians who had been distributing a pamphlet protesting the incredible corruption of the new Iraqi prime minister, Maliki. And it's called something like, "Where Does the Money Go?" And yet it's part of Manning's job to help the Iraqi authorities round up these nonviolent protesters who are just pissed off about, these vast sums of money that are disappearing.
They sound like fiscal conservatives. I'm surprised Rumsfeld wasn't into that.
You would think, but no. And so Manning, very frustrated with the rose-tinted view of the war that's getting projected at home, decides to download a ton of low-level field reports, both from the Iraq War, from the ongoing Afghan War, and then about 250,000 State Department diplomatic cables. We're in 2010. None of these documents is top secret or higher. It's all pretty low-level stuff. None of it's really about the future. These are individual field reports of incidents that have happened from the U.S. military. And it was extremely easy for Chelsea Manning to, put these onto a CD-ROM and then take them home when on leave. And it was a very low-tech exfiltration. This was not Mission Impossible 3 with suction cup gloves on the wall. And in fact, most of the big security breaches, the most famous, have been in fact very low-tech and very easy. There was really no InfoSec, information security, to speak of at Forward Operating Base Hammer or at a lot of others. And Manning sends these to WikiLeaks, and WikiLeaks starts publishing them. And the most sensational and viral of these leaks is a video filmed from the gun sight camera of an Apache helicopter that's high above a suburb of Baghdad, opening fire on a group of civilians. There are a couple people with weapons.
5 to 6 individuals with AK-47s.
But it's mostly civilians, including a few Reuters news employees, a cameraman. And you can hear the bantering pilots.
Request permission to engage.
And the helicopter identifies them as, worthy of being killed.
Just once you get on them, just open them up. Light them all up. All right, we'll be engaging.
And opens fire on them.
Come on, fire.
Hey, Roger. Keep shoot. Keep shoot.
And kills over a dozen people.
Oh yeah, look at those dead bastards.
Should have a van in the middle of the road with about 12 to 15 bodies.
Oh yeah, look at that, right through the windshield. I just drove over a body. Yeah.
It's very chilling.
Nice. Nice. Good shoot.
Thank you.
People around the world saw this. It's gotten a couple million views online. And this video, by the way, was not classified in any way. But still, the military just didn't feel like letting people see it. So they had denied journalists FOIA requests for this exact video before. And, now we have a gun sight view of one incident in that war, and I think it's something that people should see if we want to know the truth about the wars we choose to conduct, if we want to see what our statecraft is really doing.
Is what they did illegal?
The Apache helicopters?
Yeah.
Well, that's a big question, and as a matter of fact, none of the big three human rights groups in the U.S., Amnesty, Human Rights Watch, and Human Rights First, issue any kind of condemnation of that atrocity on the grounds that most of what goes on in that video is arguable under the color of international law. And I write about this in my book about Chelsea Manning, The Passion of Chelsea Manning, that the main revelation from Manning's leaks isn't so much war crimes, it's just how many atrocities are perfectly acceptable under the laws of armed conflict, which, contrary to a lot of liberal mythology and a lot of right-wing mythology as well, are not very restrictive at all. The real purpose, in fact, is to license and to authorize lethal force rather than to hold it back. I would say, to be technical, what that video captures is an atrocity, not a war crime. Now, the people use the term war crime in a very vernacular meaning, but that kind of common parlance meaning of war crime, something horrible that happens in war, turns out to be much broader than the strict legal definition, which turns out to be pretty narrow.
Got it. That's disturbing in itself, but that's like a whole other...
That's a whole other point. So Manning gets caught because while nearing the end of her service, she's essentially getting discharged from the military. She's got gender dysphoria, which means she wants to gender transition to being a woman, go from Bradley to Chelsea. And right before this young soldier is about to be discharged from the military, Manning makes the mistake of confiding in a long online conversation with a famous computer hacker named Adrian Lamo. And you can read their long online chat logs. They're on Wired. They make for a fascinating, disturbing, and truly tragic kind of 21st century one-act play. And little does Manning know that Lamo is a federal informant. And but it's very worth reading, and Manning's very clear about the political motives that she has for doing this. She thinks that the truth has not been told to the American people or to the world's people, and that people need the facts and need information to make well-informed decisions. And this is something that she's saying with her neck deep in the shit show that is the Iraq War. I mean, this is someone who committed to that war, deployed to boots, has her boots on the ground, and is seeing firsthand just what a terrible, blood-soaked mess the Iraq War is. And the hope is that if people make better informed decisions, we can avoid this kind of catastrophe. But I bring this up because the motives of Chelsea Manning have very often been written off as purely psychological, like, oh, well, only a crazy person would do this. Manning must be crazy. It must be a gender identity thing. A transgender person would do this because they're crazy.
So like a symptom of the gender dysphoria is that she's somehow like releasing information that requires psychosis to want to release, as opposed to just being a rational actor who's horrified by what she's seen?
Exactly. There's a lot of transphobia, both subtle and overt. And it's not just in the far right. You can see it at MSNBC, where MSNBC host Joy Reid has written some kind of awful, snarky things about, it turns out Manning's transgender. That kind of explains a lot. No, it doesn't explain anything. I was debating on some radio show once a group of transgender American veterans who they're very eager to hang Manning from the nearest light post because they think that she's ruined it for them, by giving them a bad image. But and I was arguing on the BBC with a log cabin Republican whose main goal seemed to be, just protect the LGBT community from any charges of treason, since there's a long tradition of right-wing people equating being gay or lesbian and being treasonous. That's been going on for a long time.
So your book was published as The Passion of Bradley Manning. Has it been updated to be called The Passion of Chelsea Manning?
It was published a few months before Manning came out officially as transgender, and that's why it has her old name. I hope it will go to a third edition, and I can rename it, make some edits here and there. Chelsea herself, by the way, has told through her lawyer that she's fine with people referring to her as Bradley when she was indeed Bradley. But though, of course, we should respect her. I see some progress for transgender justice and dignity where even John McCain is using the proper pronouns when talking about Chelsea Manning today. And I don't think that would have happened 10 years ago, maybe not even 5 years ago. So onward with that struggle for justice too, So anyway, Manning gets caught. Her first year is in punitive isolation confinement at the military brig at Quantico, a Marine Corps base in Virginia. Treated just horribly, and even against the express medical advice of Quantico's physician, is put into punitive isolation confinement. just to punish her. Punishment for its own sake. She starts becoming a cause célèbre around the world. Even the United Nations intervenes and declares that this treatment is inhumane. That's their term of art. It's just one half a notch below torture. People start raising it at presidential press conferences. And after a year of that incredibly gratuitous and harsh punishment that I think should be viewed as torture, Manning is transferred to general population at Fort Leavenworth, Kansas. And Manning is court-martialed, charged with the capital offense of aiding the enemy, is acquitted of those charges, but is found guilty of violating the Espionage Act of 1917, which is the standard piece of legislation that's been thrown at leakers ever since Nixon retooled this World War I era measure to throw at Daniel Ellsberg. And the sentence is very harsh. It's 35 years. And Manning has now served, close to 7 years of it.
What is the deal with punishing people for suicide attempts by putting them in solitary confinement? Isn't it declared torture, or is it inhumane, right below torture? What is the...
Long-term solitary is been declared inhumane treatment by the UN. In short-term, the idea is if someone is suicidal, you have to put them in a kind of bodysuit. But frequently that gets abused, and you end up just punishing someone even longer.
Solitary confinement isn't just about being monitored, right? Mm-hmm. Was Manning in the inhumane conditions that people are in when they're in solitary, like in the hole or whatever, where they're denied contact and everything? Or
yeah, Manning was. And to put this in context, Manning's solitary confinement was not some unique aberration of American ideals of criminal justice. There are between 70 and 100,000 American prisoners doing some kind of long-term solitary confinement. It's a very normal, routine part of our penal landscape. I mean, it's also an abomination and something that we need to get rid of. But yeah.
This is kind of like a next level. It's so backwards of treating suicidal behavior with...
Well, it certainly seems just bizarre and utterly perverse that if someone tries to commit suicide, you put them in even harsher conditions that are more likely to induce. That's one of the punishments that was inflicted on Manning.
It seems like homicidal on the part of the Army or whoever's,
Yeah. Or in civilian prisons, too. I mean, you can find the same kind of thing.
So that happens in civilian prisons as a response to suicide attempts also?
It can happen, yeah.
Wow. Okay, yeah, that's either such stupidity or such sadism.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of routinized sadism in our criminal justice system. So Manning's sentence was commuted. She was not pardoned by Obama. There's an important difference. If you're pardoned, that means your record is expunged. It's like the government admitting wrongdoing and bringing the charges in the first place. Your record is totally clean. This is just a commutation where you just are let out of prison early. And it's
like charity more than justice.
That's a great way to put it, yeah. And, Obama has been on a real surge of last-minute commutations. It's kind of a shame that he saved this for the very last moment in his presidency. On the one hand, it's very good because he's issued more commutations than past 11 presidents combined. On the other hand, he has turned down more clemency petitions than the last 11 presidents combined. And his batting average is not terrific, I'd say. So I want to give him some praise for at least doing more than previous presidents since Reagan, but this still could have been much bigger. There still should have been, I think, a blanket amnesty for the more than 2,000 federal prisoners who are doing life without parole for nonviolent crimes. That's the context of clemency for Manning.
Obama's a smart guy. Like, he went to, where, Harvard Law?
Mm-hmm.
He's not some reactionary. I don't think behind closed doors, at least, is some draconian, punitive villain. But he can't see, or does see, but doesn't act on it, how ridiculously abusive and just a terrible mismanagement it is to have people in jail for life for non-violent crimes. I don't think we really consider what that means when you're actually condemning someone to be in jail when they die. It's not just the time served, but it's the way they're going to be exiting the world. That sounds touchy-feely, but...
No, it's truly evil. Obama, I mean, he did commute a lot of people, but he left a lot of people hanging too. And what we should have seen from the Obama Department of Justice as some kind of blanket categorical amnesty that presidents in the past have done, whether it was Carter with draft dodgers, whether it was Woodrow Wilson with people during Prohibition, or even Lincoln, did constant churn of commutations and pardons during the Civil War. That should be a regular routine part of executive power from day one that a president or governor takes office, not just some special little farewell gift at the end. So, I hate to look a gift horse in the mouth. I think it did take political courage from Obama to commute Chelsea Manning's sentence, which is our item at hand that we're discussing. And I give him a lot of credit for that, because the easy way out would have been to do nothing and leave Chelsea to rot in jail. And God knows President Trump would not be granting any clemency. And I think that was a great thing, an important thing that Obama did there. But our prison system is still horrific. Our justice system is still horrific, and we can't go soft. I think the time for positive reinforcement is over in dealing with our government when it comes to a matter of criminal justice reform. And most of the time I read, some news report from a reform-minded journalist or in the Marshall Project, I think of how I see a lot of the horribly indulgent parents in Park Slope are talking to their children like, "Oh, Jimmy, that's so sweet. You're 12 years old and you can tie your shoes now. Oh, that's so special." No, it's not special. That's something that you expect from a kid. And, our journalists and nonprofits need to get tough and honest in the way we talk about the way our government continues to fail at criminal justice reform, and even especially Democrats. I mean, the awfulness of a Jeff Sessions Department of Justice should not blind us to how lackluster Loretta Lynch's DOJ has been. But the thing is, even though Obama represents a serious improvement in commutations, it's still not nearly enough, and we need to demand more from our Democrats, from our Republicans, and because given the horrific reality of American mass incarceration, we need clemency on an industrial scale. None of this boutique clemency bullshit. I'm talking about categorical amnesties.
Costco
style, giant economies of scale, retroactive measures that will liberate people, huge use of compassionate release for all the elderly prisoners we have. There are all these tools at the government's disposal that they could be using instead of just taking away with an eyedropper from this, drowning levels of incarceration in this country. And they need to get really more aggressive about this. And we need to hold Democrats to a much higher standard. The fact that we have some, Dixie-fried Neanderthal like Jeff Sessions waiting in the wing should not blind us to that.
I think Sanders was so good in sparking outrage and kind of impatience and not settling for the better than the Republicans. But I felt myself just watching those Betsy DeVos hearings. I have to remember that these Democrats do awful things with education too, but it's such a great foil for the Democrats to have this caricature. But it's a danger, and I feel it myself. I was like, oh my God, I'm rooting for Tim Kaine. What's going on?
Well, that's how it is. I mean, it's tough to fight a battle on two fronts, both against the Ooga Booga reactionaries, but also against these Clintonite Democrats as well.
People present that as somehow enabling reactionaries, but no, the way that we'll be able to weaken reactionaries is if we push forward people who aren't Clintonite down.
Yeah. And what's truly interesting is that when it comes to executive power using clemency, pardons and commutations on a routine basis at a very high volume, that's not just a progressive reform. In a way, that's a reactionary reform, because there's a long tradition of that, both at the state level and at the federal level. In a way, to go back to enact that would be turning the clock back in a good way. I wrote a long essay about this for the American Conservative magazine, co-founded by Pat Buchanan, looking at this great American tradition of clemency and how this, in many contexts, in many states, and in many presidencies, was a normal, routine part of government. So it's something that's both radical and forward-looking, but it's also a tradition that needs to be reclaimed very urgently.
I don't understand the roots of it or why it was a conservative thing.
Whether it's a conservative thing or not, I don't know. I mean, the word conservative, like the word progressive, can mean many different things. But just that there is this long tradition of governors. It just happens to be a tradition where instead of seeing granting clemency, executive clemency, as some nefarious end run around legitimate justice, there's a long tradition in legal thought of seeing it as a very valid and essential part of a justice system. A recognition that our laws are always a work in progress, they're always changing, and that even the best justice system makes mistakes that need to be corrected. And sometimes they're political mistakes that need to be corrected.
So anyone to the left of Scalia should be okay with this?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I don't know where Scalia stood on this himself, but frankly, I would not be surprised if Scalia himself was in favor of some forms of clemency. Although, I mean, I've restrained myself from looking too deeply into Scalia's records, but I do know it does have some surprises in it.
One of my favorite things that I read about him was a statement he said that the Constitution doesn't ban executing an innocent person as long as that innocent person has had good, fair representation.
Yeah.
That's very Catholic, too. I like that. What would Jesus do? Clearly that. I also want to know if any of your favorite responses to this, like Judith Miller's famous response where she was upset. Did someone hack her account and try to make a self-parody out of it? I couldn't believe it when I saw that. Miller's
tweet is, I can't remember it verbatim.
She tweeted, Obama commutes sentence of Chelsea Manning. How many people died because of Manning leak?
This is, of course, from the leading journalistic purveyor of the bad intel of weapons of mass destruction. I mean, if any single journalist is responsible from the Iraq War, it's her, with maybe second place to Jeffrey Goldberg. This journalist has more blood on her hands than anyone. I mean, Katie, I just hope that space aliens come visit Earth, because then maybe they will be able to measure Judith Miller's lack of self-awareness. Because God knows, I mean, that void is just not measurable by human technology and human interest.
We got to get Jerry Brown on that. Jerry Brown, Governor Moonbeam, really into space exploration.
Yeah, I mean, we need a Manhattan Project for that or something. But that was my favorite response. There have been some other good ones. Paul Ryan, who reflexively supports every idiot war and is busy trying to strip health insurance and health care from people, accused Chelsea of putting lives at risk. And, that's pretty goddamn rich.
Paul Ryan's calling Chelsea an underachiever because Chelsea only allegedly, didn't actually kill anyone, whereas Paul Ryan will be able to kill countless people.
Yeah, try harder.
Come on, Chelsea. Go big or go home.
Go big or go home. I mean, that's personal training, workout coach, Paul Ryan,
Exactly. He does do that. You've seen the photos of him, right? Lifting weights.
They're lovely men. Yeah. I want to point out that in the long court-martial of Chelsea Manning, the government was able to provide no evidence of concrete harm to any soldier or civilian. I mean, there was one journalist from Azerbaijan who may have been persecuted because his name was in the State Department cables and who was able to get asylum in the U.S. He didn't seem too torn up about leaving Azerbaijan for the U.S.
Right.
I hate to say it. There's just been no concrete evidence. Just a lot of people gushing with concern for all these hypothetical lives. People who supported the Iraq War, the Afghan escalation, the Libya War, suddenly gushing with concern over all the hypothetical imagined lives that they are trying to pin on Chelsea Manning and WikiLeaks.
They care more about imagined deaths than real deaths.
Absolutely. And it's this way of self-exculpation, of externalizing, what should be guilt. Maybe I'm giving them too much credit.
But what's the deal with the people who are really angry about this, who weren't for the war? I mean, I've just seen some liberals very upset.
A lot of Democrats are just so eager to outflank the Republicans on the right when it comes to national security.
Right.
And this is how Kennedy and Johnson got us into Vietnam. This is how half the Democratic Party in the Senate voted for the Iraq invasion. And I think this explains to a large degree Obama's persecution of whistleblowers. It's something that's deeply internalized among a lot of Democratic elites. And I think that's what we're seeing yet again.
The only people who would be upset about Chelsea Manning having a sentence commuted is someone who doesn't really believe in freedom of...
I have to say, this doesn't fall into any clean category of individual rights. It's not an individual rights issue so much as just a nakedly political issue, that we have this horrible problem of extreme government secrecy, and it leads us into disaster. I mean, through all the bad journalism and bad think pieces about this, that they've been trying to weigh transparency versus security. That's not the trade-off. The trade-off is transparency versus secrecy, and there are huge security costs to secrecy. We would not have gotten into the bloodbath of Iraq and caused that, but for dystopian levels of government secrecy, distortion, and lies. And if we don't know what our government is doing, and we don't know the facts of very important matters of statecraft, we are making, very momentous decisions without the right information. And that is almost guaranteed to lead to disaster and to carnage. And that's what we've seen. So, I mean, I need to come up with maybe a pithier, simpler way to explain that. But if you're making decisions without any information about invading foreign sovereign nations, you're going to wind up with thousands of people dead. And we saw that in Southeast Asia. We saw that in Iraq. And that's what happens when the truth doesn't get out. Well, on that cheerful note...
thank you so much, Chase. Make sure you become Patreon supporters at patreon.com/The Katie Halper Show, because I will not only be reading some erotic fiction by Scooter Libby, which includes not just bear sex, but deer sex. I'll also be reading the really great responses you, dear listeners, sent me on Facebook and Twitter when I was trying to figure out why liberals and progressives should support the commutation of Chelsea Manning.